Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. An instructor who taught the 2-clip rule to half of France unclips once, on wet rope, at the wrong rebelay of GOUFFRE Mirolda. A storm floods the descent trail of the deepest sinkhole on Earth, and a photographer signals a village with the only light she has left. And a buoyancy jacket dies at 35 meters in the clearest cave dive in Australia, over a slot that runs deeper than her air. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. On August 16th, 2026, Sylvie Marchand stepped into the cold mouth of GOUFFRE Mirolda in France, a mountain drain in the Haute-Savoie that once held the title of deepest cave on Earth. A ladder of shafts stacked more than 1.5 kilometers into the rock. She was rigging the classic route for a national training weekend. 8 hours of rope work down the great pitches, checking every anchor her students would trust the following day. Sylvie was 36 years old, an SRT instructor who had logged 4,000 pitches across 12 years. Half the young cavers in France had learned rope from her. Her signature lesson had a name in the clubs: the second clip. 2 points at every rebelay, always. Because the first clip is for the plan, and the second is for the surprise. The plan that day was 90 anchors in 8 hours, moving fast and alone ahead of the weekend, on rope she had rigged herself. Here is what you need to understand about a rebelay. It is where the rope restarts. At every ledge or deviation, the rope is re-anchored, and the caver must pass the knot, unclip from one rope, clip to the next, hanging from gear the whole way through. Passed correctly, a rebelay is as safe as a staircase. The whole craft lives in one word: correctly. The sequence has no shortcut, only an order, and the order is the second clip's whole religion. The first 60 anchors ran like a metronome, gates clicking home, test, pass, descend, her lamp swinging down shaft after shaft, boots scraping on ledges polished by 40 years of expeditions. She moved the way experts move, economically, at a pace that looked slow and covered ground like a rumor. At the 70th anchor, the cave changed its weather. A wet gallery where a summer spring hissed across the pitch head, and the ropes below ran dark with water. At the wet rebelay, that is, when the day's arithmetic thinned, she was 40 minutes behind. The spray had chilled her hands to the clumsy zone, and 100 pitches of habit began whispering that the sequence could compress, because 90 anchors in 8 hours had already failed as a plan. She reached the knot, clipped her first point to the next rope, and, reaching back through the spray, thumbed her second clip open to move it. What she didn't know, hanging in that half second between points, her first clip's gate was resting against the anchor sling, not through it. And that shortcut would collect the whole dead of the day. The wet rope shifted under her weight, the resting gate rolled free, and the mountain took her. She fell in silence with the spray. The shaft walls poured upward. Panic never had time. 25 meters passed in 2 seconds. The ledge did not move. Because this is what the second clip exists to prevent. Not the big dramatic failures, but the half second. The gate on the sling, the wet rope's shift. The one moment in 4,000 pitches when the plan and the surprise arrived together. One woman broken on a ledge, 700 meters down. One radio call from the surface team when she missed her check hour, and a mountain that measures its rescues in days. Watch what the weekend became. 40 of her own students called off their training day and onto the real thing. Stretcher teams, rope teams. A doctor lowered pitch by pitch into the dark she had rigged for them. She was alive when the first headlamps reached her at hour 9, conscious, ruined, and coaching her own rescuers on the anchors, because the teacher in her outlived everything else. Put yourself on that ledge for 1 hour of it. The spray you cannot move away from. Your own students' voices above you, steady because you trained them to be. And the second clip lesson you taught for 12 years, hanging in the dark beside you, half a second too late. The carry fought the mountain for 30 hours, 700 meters of shafts, Each pitch a full rebuild of the stretcher rig, her students passing her hand to hand up the ladder of stone she had taught them to climb. 20 hours in, she stopped coaching. 26 hours in, she stopped squeezing hands on request. The teams kept the pace anyway, because that is what she had trained into them, and hope is also a rope. They brought her into the daylight at hour 30, into a meadow full of vehicles and silence, 200 meters from where she had laced her boots. The doctor who had ridden the stretcher called it on the grass. The fall had taken too much, too deep, too far from the sun. Sylvie Marchand died of a half-second in the cave that once held the deepest title on Earth, surrounded by 40 cavers who clipped twice at every rebelay because she made them. The rope had held. The anchors had held. The sequence, compressed once in 4,000 pitches, had not. The inquest ruled the death a fall from an incomplete rebelay transfer, and the report's last line was written by her own club. The rule is not 2 clips. The rule is that the second clip goes home before the first one opens, every time, in any spray, at any hour, behind any schedule. French training weekends open differently now. Before the first pitch, every student passes 1 rebelay in the meadow, slow, in front of everyone, saying the sequence out loud. They call it Sylvie's Gate. The mountain that was once the deepest on Earth still weeps across its 70th anchor, 700 meters down, every summer. Her students rig it every season, and they pass the wet rebelay the way she taught them, and the way she died. 2 points, 1 order, 0 shortcuts. The first clip is for the plan. The second clip is for the surprise. And the surprise, her gate teaches, does not reschedule for weather. On June 30th, 2026, Camille Roy started down the stone stairs of XIAOZHAI Tiankengen in China with warm mist rising past her, into the deepest sinkhole on Earth. A double-ringed pit sunk 600 meters into the green hills of Chongqing, so vast that its own weather forms below the rim. The old visitor trail zigzags down the walls on 1,000 stone steps, and her plan was the classic photographer's day. Descend in the morning, shoot the pit's forest floor, climb out by late afternoon with daylight to spare. Camille was 29 years old, a landscape photographer who had logged 6 years shooting the great holes of the world, from Mexico's pits to the Tiankengs of China. Her pack ran on one rule learned from a drowned phone in Iceland. Every light she owned left home fully charged, headlamp, spare, and the camera flash she called her lighthouse. The plan gave her 6 hours below the rim, and the forecast gave her a dry day with evening showers, arriving politely after dinner. Here is what you need to understand about a Tiankeng in the rain. The pit is a funnel with a village-sized mouth. Water that lands anywhere on the upper bowl finds the walls, and the walls hand it down. The same stairs that carry visitors carry the runoff. In dry weather, the trail is a staircase. In a storm, sections of it stand behind waterfalls, and the pit's own rule is patient. Nobody climbs moving water. The descent was 600 meters of wonder. The double ring of cliffs stacked overhead like 2 stadiums, swifts whistling off the walls, the floor's hidden forest rising toward her 1 switchback at a time. She reached the bottom by noon and shot for 4 hours in green light that photographers cross oceans for. At 4, she packed, on schedule, and started up the 1,000 steps with the sky above the mouth still a friendly gray coin. 200 meters up, that is when the coin changed color. Thunder boomed across the mouth, and the evening showers arrived 3 hours early and all at once, because a June cell had stalled on the hills above the pit, and the polite forecast had already failed. Within 20 minutes, the upper trail sections were breathing spray, and the long middle traverse, the one cut into the sheer inner ring, went behind a white curtain of falling water. What she didn't know, watching the traverse vanish, the cell would sit on the pit for hours, and that habit would now earn its name, the lighthouse flash, charged at home like every light she owned, because the way up had closed, and the dark below the storm was coming early. The waterfall owned the traverse. The light drained out of the pit. Her phone showed no bars. She was stuck. Panic dripped from the overhangs. Because this is the Tiankeng's honest arithmetic. 600 meters of wall does not negotiate with weather. The water stops when the sky decides, and a climber who argues with a flooded traverse joins the runoff. One woman on a stone stair, 200 meters up, 400 below the rim. No signal, no companions, and a village above the mouth that had no idea she was still inside. Watch the ledger she built on the stairs. Shelter first. A trail alcove cut into the wall, dry as a cupboard, chosen before the last light went. Warmth second. Every layer from the pack, the rain cover as a bivvy skirt, the camera bag as a seat against the stone's cold. And communication third, the problem with no bars, handed to the lighthouse. Put yourself in that alcove for 1 hour of it. The waterfall beside you roaring like a turbine. The pit below breathing its wet forest smell into the dark. And in your hands, a camera flash and a memory from a first aid course. 3 of anything means help. She aimed the flash at the far rim, where the village lights glittered above the mouth. Then she began her broadcast. 3 flashes, count 60. 3 flashes. The lighthouse sweeping its one message up 600 meters of dark. At 1 hour, her thumb knew the rhythm without her. At 2 hours, the storm slackened to drizzle, and she kept transmitting. At 2:30, on the rim road above the mouth, a farmer walking home from his cousin's house stopped, watched the pit blink 3 and pause, 3 and pause, and called his son, who called the trail office. The reply came at 3 hours, as headlamps on the rim swung side to side in long arcs. Seen. Wait. Coming. And Camille answered with 3 flashes and sat back against her camera bag with her eyes stinging. The trail crew came down at first light, when the waterfall had shrunk back to a stain, and found her packed, warm enough, and photographing the dawn mist filling the pit like a tide. Because a photographer stranded in the deepest sinkhole on Earth is still a photographer. They walked the last 400 meters up together, and at the rim the farmer was waiting with his son and a thermos, wanting to meet the light he had answered. She survived on shelter discipline and a charged flash, and the trail office's report ruled the night a model stranding response and printed its sequence for the notice board. Alcove before dark, layers before signaling, 3 and pause for as long as the batteries last. Hers had lasted 4 hours and needed 3. The night had failed to take anything but sleep. The traverse has a painted line now, and a sign in 2 languages. Behind water, this trail belongs to the water. Camille's photograph of the dawn tide filling the pit ran in magazines on 3 continents, and the farmer owns a signed print. She still charges every light the night before, every trip, and her workshop students hear the Iceland phone story and then the China night. Carry a lighthouse, she tells them. Charged, aimed, patient. 3 of anything means help. And somewhere above even the deepest pit on Earth, there is a farmer walking home who will stop for a light that counts. On April 18, 2026, Peg Whitaker slipped off a wooden jetty into cold spring water on the South Australian coast, into Piccaninnie Ponds, home of the chasm, a flooded slot so clear that divers describe it as falling into open sky. She was running a permit assessment dive with one candidate. Down the chasm wall to 35 meters, hold trim in the blue, and home along the reed gardens. Peg was 51 years old, a dive instructor who had logged 30 years and 4,000 dives on the limestone coast, the examiner the permit system leaned on. Her briefings ended the same way. One thumb hooked in her weight belt. Know where this lives, and know how it leaves. Because lead is a loan, and loans get called. The plan was 40 minutes on a single tank each, the candidate leading, Peg shadowing with the examiner's clipboard slate. Here is what you need to understand about the chasm. It is a crack in the earth filled with water so filtered it barely exists. 100 meters of visibility, straight down. Divers hang over it the way skydivers hang over farmland. The clarity is the famous gift and the quiet tax. With no walls close and no particles drifting, your eyes lose the feel of depth. In the chasm, your instruments and your buoyancy are the whole sense of up. The dive opened like its own postcard, the reed gardens glowing gold, then the slot yawning below, blue past blue. The candidate led well, trimmed and unhurried, and they slid down the wall to 35 meters, on plan, 160 bar on both gauges. Peg hovered off the wall to score the hover, one thumb resting, as always, on her inflator. Mid-hover, that is when the jacket spoke its last. A soft mechanical hiss from the inflator, then nothing at the button, because a corroded valve spring had chosen its moment, and the loan against her lead had already failed. She pressed again. The button clicked without breath. The jacket held what air it had, and gave no more. What she didn't know yet, hanging heavy over the blue, the valve had also begun to weep her jacket's air away, a thread of bubbles from the shoulder dump. And that habit would now run the next 4 minutes, the thumb hooked in the weight belt for 30 years, knowing where the lead lives and how it leaves. The jacket bled, and the water pulled. Her fins answered and held. Panic hovered close. She was sinking. The gauge read 36. Because this is what negative buoyancy means over the chasm. The slot below runs deeper than her plan, her permit, and her gas. A diver who lets the sink win descends into numbers that stop being survivable without anyone laying a hand on her. One instructor, 6 kilos heavy and getting heavier. A candidate above with a working jacket and half a briefing's worth of judgment. And 100 meters of beautiful, useless visibility in every direction. Watch the 30-year briefing run itself. Move 1. The loan gets called. Her thumb was already in the belt, and 4 kilos of lead went spinning down into the blue, bought and paid for. Move 2. Signal. Slate hand flat, waved once. Problem, hold. The candidate froze in place above, exactly as briefed, a fixed point in a world with no walls. Put yourself in that water for 1 minute of it. The most beautiful visibility on Earth, telling you nothing about up. A jacket exhaling its last through a weeping valve. And 30 years of muscle memory doing arithmetic in lead while your fins hold the line. Lighter but still heavy, she swam the wall itself, fingertips walking the rock like a ladder, fins driving, breath long and priced. At 30 meters, the sink became neutralish. At 20, the wetsuit's rebound joined her side of the ledger, and the wall let her go. At 15 meters, she leveled beside the candidate and gave the okay, then the up, and they rose together along the slot's golden rim, slow, by the computer, the examiner examining her own ascent. They surfaced in the reed gardens in late sun, and Peg lay back on the water for a moment before the jetty, floating, at last, for free. On the boards, she stripped the jacket, found the weeping shoulder valve, and set it on the planks between herself and the candidate like a closing exhibit. The second half of a briefing 30 years long. She survived on lead she knew how to leave, and a wall she knew how to climb. And the incident report she filed on herself ruled the gear failure survivable by drill, and printed the sequence for the permit system. Drop the loan, fix your buddy in place, climb the wall, ride the suit. 4 moves, 4 minutes, 40 years of springs corroding somewhere right now. The chasm had failed to collect. The permit briefing at Piccaninnie carries a new line now, hers, read at the jetty before every descent into the clearest water in Australia. Your jacket is a machine, and machines retire without notice. Peg still examines over the chasm, one thumb hooked in her belt, and her candidates learn the report's ending before they earn the view. Lead is alone, she tells them on the jetty. Know where it lives, know how it leaves, and when the machine retires mid-sentence, pay the loan first and let the water owe you the rest. That is the whole verdict of 30 years.